Hey, how's it going? This video is a little goofy. I felt like talking about how your brain kind of constructs its own version of reality. Sorry, I'm coming off a little strong straight out of the gate here. Let me just bookend this episode by saying this is me throwing out a really cool concept and letting you do whatever you want to do with it, right? Like if you want to take this idea, write it down, roll it up and hammer it into one of your orifices, that's on you, man. I'm not telling you what to do. Just do whatever feels right and accept the consequences. Now, I think this concept that I want to talk about is a super important thing to understand to function well in the world, but I feel like we rarely ever discuss it, like we as in society or whatever, or at least we don't put it in the terms that I'm about to put it in. This concept is the reason that you have the worldview that you do. It's also why some people seem reasonable to you while others seem crazy and irrational. Oh, I'm really edging you with this one. Okay, here's the big reveal. I'm talking about paradigms. So what's a paradigm? A paradigm is a way of looking at the universe. It's a mental framework that you have about how the world works. If reality is a game of chess, your paradigm is the chessboard. You're a pawn, the girl you like is a rook, the knight is a guy she's into, the queen is your dad, and the king is your dad's wife who's got a beard. Okay? Makes perfect sense. I definitely haven't ruined this by trying to make it funny. Okay, can we start again? Your paradigm is your assumptions about the nature of reality. Paradigms are ridiculously powerful because they contextualize everything you perceive with your senses, which means a paradigm acts like a lens through which you view all of reality. Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, atheism, rationalism, spiritualism, conservatism, progressivism, liberalism, fascism, communism, nationalism, these are all paradigms. And every paradigm makes certain assumptions. Paradigms lead you to think certain things are self-evident, when in reality, those supposedly self-evident things, I think, are more likely to be a feature of your paradigm than a feature of reality. But it's very hard to see that from within the paradigm that thinks it's self-evident, mostly because the paradigm you have discourages you from really thinking too hard about the particular assumptions that it has. A result of this is that your paradigm also influences what questions you even think to ask. And when you do ask a question, when you do an experiment, your paradigm influences how you interpret the data from any experiment that you do. Paradigms are so slippery, like everyone has one, but no one feels like they have one. Paradigms are kind of necessary to be able to think. They're like mental axioms, so everyone has them. Even if you've got a very individualist mindset and you don't subscribe to some framework with a name that other people came up with, you've still got a paradigm. It's just your own home brand hodgepodge of a paradigm. And even if you're really open-minded, you kind of helplessly subscribe to a paradigm, even without meaning to. Valuing open-mindedness is in and of itself a paradigm, because you're assuming that doing so is valuable. It's impossible to have no mental paradigm, unless you want to never think about anything. The assumptions at the bottom of a paradigm kind of provide a springboard to be able to contextualize what you experience. The only thing about reality that isn't a paradigm is the literal sensory experience that you're undergoing. Everything outside of that is a paradigm. And I mean literally everything. This goes insanely deep, much like your mum. Sorry. Let's give a few examples, but let's start at relatively surface level and go incrementally deeper. Okay, so politics. This is probably the most obvious one. Left-wingers screech autistically in one direction, right-wingers screech autistically in the other direction, no one listens to anyone else, and everyone's convinced that their side is right and everyone else is stupid. Politics makes it pretty obvious that if you go deep into a paradigm, you'll become increasingly resistant to exploring new perspectives. Religion can also do this in a pretty obvious way. This is true for all paradigms, though. In fact, if you're deep enough, you'll become incapable of seeing that your paradigm is a paradigm at all. You'll be increasingly convinced that your paradigm simply is reality, not a viewpoint, not an interpretation, but a completely true, inarguable thing. You'll think that it just is reality. Paradigms do this. They're sneaky. They try to mesh themselves with reality itself, when that's not what they are. Science itself operates within various paradigms. That's not me shitting on science or anything. It's just science does need to have certain paradigms to function. It's not really completely objective. It has cultural and economic drivers, and if nothing else, it's susceptible to the fact that whatever paradigm you do have as a person influences your attention, and therefore it also determines what you end up studying and researching, and it also affects how you'll comprehend any data that you find. Your paradigm dictates the boundaries of whatever you consider to be possible, so if something isn't valid within your paradigm, it's very likely that that thing won't even occur to you, and you certainly don't imagine those things to be possible. It doesn't even occur to you to research things that aren't valid in the paradigm that you have. This is kind of like how we can experimentally verify Einstein's theory of relativity now, but back in Newton's time, it's not that we just didn't have the technology to do that, it's that the paradigm of relativity didn't exist yet. No one had even thought of that paradigm, and the Newtonian paradigm isn't ultimately compatible with it, and studying it doesn't lead from one to the other. So if you noticed some problems with Newtonian mechanics and you tried to solve them by refining Newton's ideas, you'd never get to Einstein's ideas. It required a radical leap in logic to go from Newton to Einstein. If we stayed in the Newtonian paradigm, we'd just have added extra forces and masses and whatever trying to solve problems which were never going to be solved that way. A paradigm shift was needed to move forward. It took someone willing to hit pause on their existing paradigm so they could explore alternate ones to even give us the relativistic paradigm. Even mathematics itself has axioms. What are axioms? They're kind of assumptions. A plus B is equal to B plus A. That's an axiom. Maybe you could arrange mathematics in such a way where that statement isn't true, but if such a way exists, we don't really care about it. We care about mathematics where our intuitive baselines are correct. We choose the paradigm where that statement is true. So the actually wise thing to do is to notice that you have a paradigm too, and it constructs your experience of reality. Sorry to interrupt, this is just a quick message to say, statistically speaking, you're probably not subscribed, so I'll make you a deal. Press the subscribe button and I won't come over to your house and do this. Alright, thanks, back to the video. You're arguably kind of constructing reality. It's no wonder that two people who have different paradigms are almost like two people living in different realities. And like, I really do mean that. The difference between paradigms can be unbelievably huge. Maybe you think I'm overhyping this whole talking about reality thing, like I'm talking about the universe or something. Like, you know, we know some things for sure, right? Like, we're not about to find out that the universe doesn't exist or something, right? Well, this is kind of awkward because, honestly, yeah, that is kind of what I'm saying. This shit goes outrageously deep. I say all this because my particular paradigm is very different to most people's. I'm not going to ram my paradigm down your throat too hard, but I might as well take the opportunity to list a few things which most people think are immutable parts of reality, which I really very strongly think are actually just parts of your paradigm. They're mental constructs, artificial frameworks, not actual features of reality. These are things that you pretend are real so hard that you forget that you're even pretending. One of them is the border between where one physical object ends and another one begins. That is just made up for the purpose of making it easy to talk about things. That isn't actually real. There are no distinct physical objects. The universe is just kind of one big system. It's all interconnected. There are no closed system parts of it. The existence of free will, both logically and physically, that makes no sense. By extension, the existence of the self in the traditional sense also doesn't really make sense. The existence of other conscious agents in the world, that's totally something you assume is the case, as is the existence of physical reality itself. Now, let me reel this back for a sec. If everything that I've just said is correct, if all that stuff is just paradigms, then what actually is reality? I would say reality is only the things that you're experiencing within consciousness and nothing more. No stories or models or assumptions or explanations about how that content is occurring or about what consciousness or existence really is. Just the raw experience. That's what actually exists, and that's all that actually exists. But that's where it gets interesting, because now, of course, one of the things that exists within consciousness is thought, and paradigms themselves are a feature of thought. So in a strange meta kind of way, the paradigms are real because thoughts are real and paradigms are thoughts. And at the same time as that, the paradigm that all paradigms are equal is in and of itself a paradigm. Yeah, it's very weird and self-referential. I recommend you give all this stuff some thought though, because it's kind of fun to think about. Anyway, I'm not trying to say that all paradigms are bad or that they're all equally wrong. Like, Mormonism is a paradigm and the scientific method is a paradigm. I'd say one of those paradigms is astronomically better than the other. I'm going to leave it up to you to guess which one I think is better. I'd also say that what makes one better than another is how closely it approximates reality. Now, a paradigm can never be perfect. It can never embody reality exactly because it's just a model of reality. If it were a perfect model, it would just be reality. That said, some paradigms are clearly closer to reality than others, and here's where it's good to mention open-mindedness. What is open-mindedness exactly? Here's how I conceptualize it. I think of open-mindedness as a skill, and the skill is this. It's suspending your own paradigm just for a while so you can explore an alternate one without the assumptions that you normally make preemptively clouding your ability to understand the new one properly that you're exploring. Now, that doesn't mean throwing away everything that you think you know, but it does require you to have the confidence to truly actually hit pause on your existing paradigm while you explore an alternate one. You aren't going to forget everything that you believe in the course of a few hours or whatever while you're exploring something different, but it will help you understand this new paradigm if you actually surrender to it. And if you're very confident of your existing paradigm, you should know that it won't go anywhere. You should know that once you're done exploring, you can just go and pick it back up and resume where you left off. So if the idea of voluntarily choosing to let go of your paradigm just briefly for the purposes of exploring another one makes you uncomfortable, that's a sign, I think, that you know that your existing beliefs aren't actually bulletproof. I'd say it's a sign that you know that your paradigm is fragile and it needs constant reinforcement to stay real. You know that if you're not constantly protecting and fortifying it, it'll collapse. In other words, it's a bit of a tell that you know that your favorite paradigm isn't actually true. Now, at the same time as open-mindedness, we do have to balance the practicality of exploring every single new idea that you encounter. There's an additional skill here, which is noticing when someone or some group or some process produces ideas which are all a steaming pile of fucking stupid fucking bullshit. This is why I avoid scientific conspiracy theories like the plague, because, I don't know, between the ages of like 8 and 15, I was very open-minded to them. I actively went looking for all that stuff, and I had it all, to my taste, very thoroughly debunked. Ghosts and Bigfoot and UFOs and the lost city of Atlantis and ancient civilizations that could move boulders by tactical yodeling or some shit. Fuck. I know I'm coming off as dismissive when I'm trying to make an episode about how every viewpoint is just a paradigm. My point actually is that I didn't dismiss the conspiracies before actually suspending my own paradigm, going in, losing myself in them on purpose, coming back, finding my previous paradigm, and reconciling everything. That's what you should do. Don't just listen to people who have the same paradigm as you, telling you what people of the opposite paradigm are saying. Ditch your own paradigm, just momentarily, and go actually immerse yourself in the other paradigm. Actually try to believe it. That's the way to get answers. For realsies, bro, trust me on this. Also, effective communication between paradigms can be nearly impossible. So when you're trying to communicate an idea to someone, often what they'll want you to do, in order for them to agree that your idea is correct, they'll want you to formulate your idea in such a way that it fits into their paradigm. But that's obviously absurd. Like, if someone's paradigm assumes that the Bible is the literal word of God, showing them the historical inconsistencies in it isn't going to change their mind. At the same time, if someone assumes that rationality is the only way to truth, there is no Bible chapter that they can read that's going to convert them. You can probably see how this whole back and forth is completely pointless because neither side is going to change what they think. But on some level, you do this too. If you're one of the few people who are actually open-minded enough to see that sometimes people with other worldviews to you do sometimes get something right, even if, maybe it's by accident, but sometimes those other people get something right. So you listen to those people with other worldviews, even if you think those worldviews are horrible or intolerant, but you just want to hear so that you can see if there's any nugget of wisdom in there that you could fold into your worldview. Even if you do that, notice that what you're doing is you're testing each claim that the other person makes against your existing paradigm. And if what they're saying fits into your paradigm, you accept it. And if it clashes with your paradigm, you reject it. But notice that most of the time, all you're doing is trying to reinforce your existing paradigm. You'll say that you're open-minded, but you're listening to other paradigms for the purpose of finding material to bolster your existing paradigm. At least you do this until you're force-fed an alternate paradigm in such a way that causes you to undergo a paradigm shift, like the whole Newton and Einstein thing, right? Eventually your existing paradigm becomes untenable in some way, it collapses, and you're forced to restructure it into something new. But of course, shifting paradigm like that is scary. You don't want your paradigm to collapse, because when your paradigm collapses, it feels like you're losing your grip on reality. Literally, because you're so attached to it, you think it is reality. This is true even if you're aware that it's just a paradigm that you're losing, but it's especially true if you're not aware enough to notice that it's a paradigm. If you think your reality is actually collapsing, that's some scary shit. Your brain processes it all almost like it's a survival risk, so of course you're emotionally invested in your religion or your politics or your science or your culture or your whatever. Of course you're invested in it. It makes perfect sense. You have an emotional response to try and defend this thing. Now, I don't really know what to do with all this information. I'm just throwing it all at you like, yeah, you deal with this. But I don't know. Let me know in the comments why I'm wrong and why your paradigm is right, actually, and I'll respond by giving you an even worse existential crisis next time. Alright, that'll do it. If you want to play a fun game, go back to the beginning of this episode and take a drink every time I say the word paradigm. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Big thanks as always to my elite level channel members, Thunderbolt22A10, who left his paradigm at your mum's house last night, Nomad Greg, who chews ass and kicks gum, and he's all out of gum, Yannick Spathe, who can yodel press 3 pyramids, Andrew Mole, who was the inspiration for the Emperor of Man in 40k, John Bejarano, who doesn't believe in electricity because he doesn't need to, his appliances are too scared of him to not do what he says regardless, and thanks to all my other members too. Join the channel if you like, and as always, I'll catch you in the next one. Over and out.